Hello everyone, welcome to tonight's message, tonight's episode. The title is The Roads That Our Communication Will Pave. And so we, as creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, can move objects with our hands, with our bodies, and we can move subjects with our bodies plus minds. So the work of the body is movement, and the work of the mind is movement. And so we can see that it is a communication between the observer and the observed. The mind communicates. The body is a communication. And so it's as if nature and biology have communicated the potential of the psychology of the being. So we can say that in ancient times they had this system of perceiving a dimension of body, a dimension of mind, and a dimension of soul. Now if we, for a moment, instead of having these three words have their previous connotation, saw them as states of communication. That means rather than the person feeling like they exist, existence is a type of communication, you know? We are an unknown moment communicating through a manifest body. We are an unknown moment communicating through a non-manifest dynamic mind. And when it comes to the soul is instant. That means it's like imagine it's like a triangle. And what I mean by this is that at the bottom of the triangle, there is the horizontal line dividing the triangle. I'll give you this example. Imagine an inverted triangle. The central point, the one point where the two lines, how would I say it? So visualize an inverted triangle. The top 2 points are, we will call them A and B, and we'll call them M and B. Or I'll just say it like this. There is a distance in manifestation to the instantaneity of expression. The body has a delay. The mind has less of a delay. The soul poetically is instantaneous. Imagine that in the future, children are taught 3 modes of communication. As a human being, we can be the causal force behind the effect of an object. We can be the unknown causal force over the rhythms of the mind. And we can be an unknown causal source to the unknown effect instant. You see, now there is bodies, now there is a world, now there is something to do in the void. You know, for eons I would say it is as if there is just sight. You know, it's as if the world is space in our sight, or is our sight in space? Or is our sight space? In the future there will be advanced communicators, and there will be different schools of communication. We can say athletes, they have focused on outer realm communication. For example, philosophers have focused on inner realm communication. And mystics have focused beyond this realm communication. But anyways, I'm just trying to suggest how on this planet we have opened our eyes to the human design, to the human story. I felt that there was more to the human story than I realized there's just more to stories in general in life. You see, we are a sort of creature that before experiencing anything, once the engines of the individual psychology have been set into motion after Jacques Lacan's mirror effect, perhaps a startling observation, we have been responding to the stimulus, to the design-based stimulus of the inner realms from the beginning. That means a person can say imagination is not real, but then when you wonder about their identity and I thought, it's like if imagination is not real, then every sound that we are seeing meaning in is unreal. When a person looks at a chessboard, if they understand the chessboard, they understand the ability of the pieces on the chessboard. After they have understood the ability of each piece on the chessboard, then strategy arises. That means no strategy can be implemented until every being involved begins to find their part in the moment. Our communication will take us far. Our communication is the next great technology of our species. You can say it is the closest thing to a transcendental technology we have. to a truly multidimensional technology, the moment a person feels like a character, you know, let's say right now as I'm speaking, I'm like, okay, I'm this person, you know, I'm this character in the world, and I visualize this. Like, imagine I feel like I'm an angel, like there's a halo above my head, or I suddenly feel like there's fire. It's like whatever I envision in the linguistic simulation, and the way a person knows they are active in the linguistic simulation is that when you close your eyes, you can still see. That means anybody aware of their subjective realm, of their inner realms. Like, for example, I don't have kids, but if it seems to be a case, I remember reading it in an article that a lot of children see, they communicate to invisible friends. The same way the child's mind looks at a teddy bear and animates the toy as its best friend, the same way the child's mind is also, there isn't the ability to discriminate yet between what is the inner realm and the outer realm. So let's say a child, for example, sees and comes to the parent and like, I have an invisible friend, you know, and the parent's like, okay. Right? And most parents are like, no, that's nothing, you know, that's like, you know, they entertain it, right, or dismiss it. But I will tell you, it's one of those moments, it's as important of a moment as a child looking in the mirror and noticing its individualism. That means it's like when a child notices notices, and you can say in a way an object of the inner realms, which is a subject. It's just discrimination. Parents should be like, sweetheart, that's your inner realms. The invisible friend is in your inner realms. That's also where imagination dwells. You know, we don't explain, we dismiss. You know, we need to. I will tell you. Albert Einstein even said it. Imagination is the sign of true intelligence, something like that. And I always wondered, why is he saying that, right? And then I realized, because reality is like an object like a clay object taken out of an oven. You know, reality becomes statue-like. And so it's as if a pattern. Imagine all of knowledge being a pattern, being a code on a matrix screen. Now imagine that code is repeating. It is only imagination that can tap into the new code. And this discrimination of this is imagination, this is reality, oh my God, you know, imagination, it doesn't exist. I'll tell you, imagination is the extension of reality. It is what happens when reality defines itself. It instantly has an unknown edge, and anything beyond that can be declared imagination or whatever. You can say an explorer in the outer realms. You know, somebody exploring a land nobody's ever been to, you know, some explorer, let's say, you know, and this explorer, technically, the land that he hasn't explored yet is imagination. It's unreal. But when we explore it, it becomes real. It's as if, even when it comes to the scientific method, it's a process of seeing a falsification. It's an intentional process of falsification. You know, as if I would say the scientific method is like a person kind of holding a sword and just endlessly hitting something to see if the sword breaks. Everything is abstract until we move and make it real. You can say a person suddenly feeling they're hungry, you know, is an abstraction. That means the stomach just makes a noise. But that psychology of, all right, I'm going to get food and eat it and all of this, that's like abstraction. The moment you act in accordance to the inner realms, the inner realms becomes outer realm reality. You know, I'll give you an example. It's as if somebody says nobody has ever said, nobody has ever created a character in, I don't know, like, you know, hypothetical mythology called Potatius or something, you know, like take the word potato and instead of the O add IUS, you know. You know, it's like nobody, that's just a random example I'm saying, but the idea of it is kind of like it wasn't, nobody had said it until it was said. That's all I'm trying to prove here, to show you. Our knowledge should not be based on just a kinetic interpretation of energy. So many things remain as potential. Even love is a potential. It starts that way. It starts as a potential in the inner realm, something that pulls you, if it's real. When I think about history, I get fascinated of how many ways human beings have moved on this earth. Literally how many different kinds of human beings there have been on this planet and how they have roamed and spent their time. Then it also fascinates me that in how many ways human beings are going to open their eyes on this planet and communicate, you know? And we have people on this planet shy to communicate. You know, there was a point in my life where I was like, a PowerPoint presentation was like, I felt the classroom was like Medusa and I was turning into stone. Like, you know, there's this realm is an opportunity. Those who understand the simple truth of this statement will fulfill their lives. Those who nullify the opportunity will live a life as if they were never born. That means if there is, for example, in Vedic thought even, the idea that there's higher dimensions and higher truths, and pretty much there's 7 upper worlds and we're on like the bottom part of Mount Meru. If there is potential eternalism beyond sensory perception, then to be eternal in sensory perception defeats the opportunity. You know, it's as if somebody not eating, you know, somebody deciding to fast, then their fast is over, for example, and they go to a restaurant, you know, and in the restaurant, they're sitting there, the meal is, they've ordered a meal, they've intentionally went into the restaurant, they ordered a meal, the meal is at their table, but the person's like, I don't want to eat it, I'm enlightened, I don't want to live my life, I want everything to flow, you know. And so it feeds, it's as if like there's a forgetfulness that non-duality, I find, will not suffice the journey of the soul. Communication will happen in so many ways. And it's impossible to speak in a moment in history and to not have the future see your blind spots. I know this, so in my talks, I try to play around a little. You know, I know one day the future, if, I don't know, who knows what's gonna happen, but like if the if the future generations see my talks, I'm trying to leave them clues, you know. Because a lot of activity that is self-justified, because it's in a collective world, is collectively justified, you know? The most immediate thing that our species requires is to activate the inner realm film. People have to start listening and reading and just taking in information, not as, okay, what does this snapshot photo mean, but as a film. It's as if being a director and an actor of the same moment at the same time, you know? The way we communicate paves the mental roads for the future generations. It paves how their minds are going to introduce themselves to the world. I chose this picture. I don't know who drew this, but it's an incredible picture. This picture made me feel as if this soldier, this woman, the soldier in the scene, she is as if she was born into this world, as if she has no reference for a time where the world was not at war, imagine. Or she has been in war so long, it has become like an everyday thing, right? So it just tells me that what we do now creates the future memory of the species. That means right now, every person, sure, how they are behaving creates their own memory, how they're going to remember themselves in the future. But the species is also creating how it's going to remember itself. And the future is going to scan, you know? Imagine in the future they find this technology that is like this technology beyond time, where we can suddenly reanimate every being in history. That means we thought people died, but they all in the future were reanimated, you know, were resurrected, or that we found a way to completely reverse time and go back, you know. So imagine a sort of advanced kind of, this is very pretty sci-fi context, but some sort of advanced future technology. I will call it a timeless technology. So technologies that are in time and technologies that are beyond time. So at this point of, let's say we get to a timeless technology, and we find an ability where we're like, no way, we can control whether, like a film, time goes forward or backward. Now imagine, because we're at a point of having a timeless technology, we are not touched by time. Like a three-dimensional being has no trouble moving in 2 dimensions, but a 2-dimensional being can't fathom how it's gonna exist and how it exists in a 2-dimensional fashion. Our communication sets the world while the world is already set into motion by the laws of nature. It's as if the laws of nature are providing the canvas or are drawing the outlines, and the laws of man in nature are coloring in through the outlines, as if the macrocosm is the outline, the microcosm is how it's being colored in, you know. For me, I had this vision, honestly, I heard it from this YouTube compilation of like business advice, you know. And there was some person in that compilation, I remember I remember the quote. It was something as if like the best way to make money is to make money when you are asleep and you're still making money. You know, a self-sustaining system, a sort of invention of income. Do you know? Where the person, and of course investment in land and real estate is kind of like this. I mean, anything you invest in is kind of like this. But you can sleep and it's growing in some value, potentially. But I'm saying that it was just the idea of a self-sustaining system. For me, it's as if the only issue with a human failure is that we don't create backup systems before we risk. Imagine everybody built just a backup system. Pretty much it was, I would say, just common sense tactics where the person would have a sort of self-sustaining headquarter and then expand, da 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 da, you know. So a self-sustaining system for human communication has to be a method, a system where, strangely, it may be kind of strange of me to say this, but it has to be like a theme park for a hamster in a cage. Okay, we are a hamster in a cage. We don't have a theme park of communication. I mean, what the internet has allowed, for me, the creators of YouTube should get a medal. For me, it's as if like this is like noble, like next level contribution to the species kind of deal, you know. From the fog of ethnocentrism, the internet started to slowly pull us out like cats, like kittens held from the back, being pulled out of the boxes of their own, you know, self-conceivement. For me, that self-sustaining network, that means for me it's like an advanced civilization. It's like yeah, in my inner realms, sure, I can experience it, but in the outer realms there is so many things required to happen where it's as if our minds are kind of poetically living like 200 to 400 years ahead of our bodies, you know. The mind, if it is like a three-dimensional phenomena, the body, if it's a two-dimensional phenomena, you can say that which is witnessing the body being animate through the mind is like a fourth-dimensional phenomena. That means it is a totally different interconnection of the past reference with a new reference, right? That's one thing that we know, that anything that is considered to be higher dimensions, it's as if like something is added or has been noticed that wasn't there before, you know. So when it comes to communication on a massive scale, that means if the Rubik's Cube of our modern times, philosophical Rubik's Cube, was like, okay, 8 billion creatures on a rock more advanced than any other species on the planet, their advancement gives them a sophisticated use of language and awareness to their own mortality, where they can make decisions. A lot of animals, all animals, if you look at it, I'm not trying to of course dismiss the great work of the New Age community in regards to abstract expansion, but I would say that it's as if all animals in nature have been here and now. For 4.5 billion years, we have been the here and now. But we are here now. And so it's as if some people try to get out of simulations, others use it. They use the simulation. And I will tell you, the outcome of the heart is how it touches the moment. I'm telling you, this is one thing I can't tell you, it's everything I have done. Its outcome has been to this, that how your heart felt before your brain reigned beliefs. Just like we have an observable universe and an unobservable universe, we must establish in the domain of any sort of study, any sort of branch of academia that deals with communication, which is everything. The advancement of communication with modern explorers. Pretty much trying to land the unobservable potential communication of the non-local inner realms. That means I will tell you a solution where I personally feel this works every time. To anybody who feels there is some sort of issue of mind they have. You know what the solution is? You gotta go back to, here's the thing, let's say the person looks at their past, they can't deal with it, it's too messed up, it's too shadowy, it was something off with how they lived in the past, right? You look at the past, it's past, you look at the present, it's just standing here, it's just like you could do whatever, but it is the future that snaps the person out of any sort of ideological structure. That means for me, I will tell you, if one doesn't get offended by their mortality, they will not find novelty. They will not care. I think about everything in my life that has caused a sort of suffering, or I would use a more modern term for suffering, inefficiency. And when I think about how many times the world is going to change its clothing, its cultural identity, global cultural identity. Like, we are living at such a cool time where the global identity hasn't been established. You know, I feel now more than ever, people's names will be written in history if they care to move towards the advanced. I find the issue has never been what belief is right or wrong, is true or false. The concern for human living and ideology has always been that we are like a battery, and this battery has a certain amount of energy throughout the day. And so what content out of the outer realms, because it's endless content, you know, there's endless information out there. People are like, yo, you know, you know, where do I find content? It's just like, oh, look outside a window. There's so much information that technically you will feel like Midas, where everything you touch can be gold. It's because everything is already gold. So many, you can say, information is everywhere, you know. It's like, what do we do? It's like, so technically we are information, seeking information to be informed that it is still information. It's just a bunch of ideas just moving around on the surface of the planet, and people get caught into these winds and storms. And so this, if the human being is a sort of energy throughout the day, the attention can be very, I don't want to use the term crystallized, because crystallized means it has reflections off many dimensions. I wouldn't say you can even use that metaphor for attention unless it's as above, so below sort of thing. But I would say that attention is like a light beam in a dark room. It has piercing force. That means that's the power of consciousness. It is like the same amount of pressure of like a sculptor sculpting a statue, you know. So I remember I wrote it, I don't have the paper here in front of me, but I think I wrote it down 2 days ago. I was trying to figure out what are all the ways that we can communicate. I was like, okay, we can communicate with others. You know, people have communicated with the spirit of nature. Technically, that means we can communicate with the world. You know, we communicate with ourselves, like that person passing a beam between two cliffs. You know, and being like, don't look down to himself. You know, so we self-communicate, we other communicate, we world communicate. You know, and I feel there is also the state where we are at communication. When I use the term advanced communicator, I'm not just putting the word advanced in front of the word communicator. The advanced communicator is the idea that the universal event that we're all in is a communication. It's but for now we're considering it's like the laws of nature, which arise as constants. You know, it's as if everything in the universe is changing, but we're like, yeah, certain things are fixed. Sometimes I wonder, does the voice have a purpose, or is the voice being the purpose? Sometimes it's like wondering, does life have a truth or a meaning, or it is just the word is the truth? That means sometimes I wonder if people were born but they never moved. Imagine we were just statues, right? it would be a sort of life where there would be no personality. Like it's like to be a human being is not just for the objective, the object component of the moment moving, being in a dynamic, but it's also how that, you know what it is? It's literally like we are like an unknown point, and there's endless lines stretching to different points, a different degree, generating different degrees of a circumference we can't see. So imagine you suddenly opened your eyes and you were in the center of a circle. And imagine that you had some sort of amnesia. Instead of remembering 360 degrees, you could only remember, let's say, 30 degrees. Okay? Out of this 360. So you would suddenly find yourself, and imagine this, however, this 30% could move, you know? So you could see from different degrees by just moving through this 30%, or like the mystics, you could try to make this 30% into 90%, and then the whole karmic experience moves to a different shift. That means if I treat myself as a human being, I will see the end of a human being. That's the mystical trick. Who are you right now? Who were you before you were born? You see, before we were born, we had a name, and our name was everything. But then we were born, rather from the 360 to the 30 degrees. And now we can either like 30, 30, 30, you know? We could try to use this 30-degree perception 12 times. Or we could instantly realize the center of the circle never went anywhere. You know, it's interesting, when you're younger and you read something, the context is foreign as much as your eyes are foreign to what the content, you know, as if like somebody who doesn't know what a sky is, it's like you can't talk about skydiving. And it's just words. That means the species has to wake up from the linguistic simulation, which means we're going to become playful with language, and that's a sign of multidimensionalism. That means there was there were warriors on the battlefield, and you see this in a lot of shows, where the warrior is not alone. The warrior has a sort of power with him. And so the power makes his psychology be certain in accordance to a completely different dimension of looking at the view. That means, imagine, I heard this from Wayne Gretzky, this incredible hockey player, Canadian hockey player, and he said that sometimes when he would play, he would feel as if he's hovering and seeing the hockey court from above the players and everything, right? So it was as if his smoothness of reflexes was not coming from just a view from his first-person view from his eyes. It was like a video game like Skyrim, where you could change from first-person view to third-person view, and then you could notice your surroundings as one bigger moment, you know? Imagine all of life was a person, and you were like, who are you? And all of life was like, none of your business. I'm being playful, but really what I'm saying is the effort of the conscious I thought to truly wonder about the essence of space. It means that we're wondering about a truth where the concept of birth and death had not emerged yet. Because from birth, you enter time. That means imagine there are children, or no, I shouldn't even say children, they're beings that are just space, they're just attention, they don't even have a body, they're like an invisible mind, right? And imagine this invisible mind suddenly chooses to take shape. Okay, now we can say, yo, invisible mind, no way, you know, you need to have a body to have a mind, right? But it could be that that the eyes are nature's secret, and unless one abides by their nature, they will not see it. We treat the universal moment as if it's not alive. We treat it as if we are more alive than the world, so we prioritize ourselves more important than the life of the world. But imagine if the whole world was alive. Imagine on a regular basis, like literally we turned on the news and there was a channel, and on this channel they're like, today the voice of the planet told, you know, all the government of nations to stop fighting. Can you imagine you turn on the TV and we had an open, some sort of, this is too very abstract of course this idea, but like we had a dialogue with our universe. And we realized we could not have that dialogue until we were universal. And when you are universal, there's no need for dialogue. It's like, what did two universal beings say to one another? Nothing. That's it. Exactly. Nothing. You know what two universal beings said to one another? It's like, hey man, so I'm a universe and you're a universe. So where are we? Where are we standing? You know, I feel I was blessed that in my childhood I feel I was born in 1991 and I would still play outside. You know, sports, climb trees, make foolish mistakes, you know. You know, play games that before video games it was like we were playing games in the streets, literally, like you know, it's like playing was way more thug before video games, you know, people were actually physically moving, you know, now your cyber body moves, you know. Now people are, there probably is like, you know, there probably should be an app where you can climb trees on the app. And on the app, it also artificially says the calories you're losing. So it says the calories your cyberspace self is losing, you know, and the person's like, yeah, I lost a lot of calories today, but in cyberspace. But I remember the complete, it's as if, that's why I'm saying it's a blessing, because I witnessed not only through myself, but how the world went, where the world was at the edge. I think the 1990s was the last was the last moment before the nature of the world flow changed. And really it was technology opened its eyes wider than it could any more nature could keep it closed. You know, that means for me, like in the Greek gods chaining the Titans and the Titans kind of being released, it is like as much of a view of what I feel AI is, right? We are like the gods that create the AI, yet we chain the AI. We chain the Titan. And if the outer realms becomes the paint for your god, then change becomes your God. And what I mean by this is like the word God is archaic, but the whole notion is that at some point human beings were like, yo, where do people come from? People, where does the world come from? A person. That was the first connection with a sort of identity. It was as if we had to give the planet an ego so their two egos could speak to one another, you know? You know? Can you imagine? It's like, the person's like, what do I want? What should I do about my ego? And the person's like, don't worry about your ego. What should we do about the planet's ego? Like, what is this? Yeah. I feel that people, this is, I would say, kind of maybe more closer to a shamanic relationship with the unknown divine, with nature's divinity. For me, there's two kind of major rules to keep in mind in nature when a person walks in nature or goes towards nature. You cannot hide your energy. That's the first thing. That means if you are going in nature with violence, there is literally, even you can say the leaves are whispering for what needs to leave that moment, you know? So it's like you cannot hide anything in nature. So the moment the person decides they're a natural being, you actually realize it's like you have no choice other than to be honest in this realm. If you're not honest, you're not being you. That's the danger of dishonesty. That's the danger of even environments where great beings go to work, yet they fall into shadow simulations and in the light of a great program, you know. So energy is important. You can't hide anything. And the second thing about nature is that you have to watch it like imagine a friend of yours was in the room, right? That's a living being. Literally your psychology and attitude changes to compared to imagine if a robot entered the room. Imagine you had a robot friend, you know, and the robot friend was just designed to just agree. Or designed to just disagree, you know? But I'm saying, we have to somehow re-evoke the wilderness we had in the jungle, but for our inner realms, in a way, in an outer civilization where it doesn't make it, like individual advancement doesn't mean collective, disadvancement. That's the thing. If we were living in a civilization where individuals' mistakes could also somehow contribute, imagine the civilization was so advanced, nobody could make a mistake. And so some people, let's say an alien came to our civilization, it's like, how's this possible? How do you guys can never make mistakes? You know? And we're like, because the collective system has had the brilliance of realizing its foolishness to be in a world with so many different kinds of phenomenology and to just classify it into two groups. For how long is it just good and bad? Right and wrong? What is this? We have taken symbols too seriously and denied the life of novelty, which in an instant can be allowed. You see, if it was freedom in the outer realms, the person has to do something physically. Let's say if there's any sort of problem in life, right? The person has to wonder, is this from my outer realms or is it from my inner realms? Okay, let's say if you were back in medieval times in a battlefield, right, and somebody was charging at you with a sword, you know, so that would be an outer realm problem. But let's say you were just that person had finished that battle, right? And as one, but there was some, PTSD or something, and they were walking, in the village, and suddenly, oh my God, they saw like intense scenes of death in that battle repeat, right? That would be an inner realm problem, right? And the moment you can discriminate and notice where the problem is, you can know the type of remedy, and not exactly what the remedy is, but you can know if the remedy is instantaneous or it requires strategy. Because if instantaneously we would get perfect results, there would be no need for strategy, technique. We haven't reached there. Like if we were advancing at the speed of light, there would literally be nothing to see. It's like we built the advanced civilization, and then everybody's like, why can't we see it? And we're like, but it's in the unobservable universe. Nature's wisdom reminds man that he is an insect on a cosmic leaf. The leaves on the tree are the universes, the branches, the multiverse. Right now, we are experiencing life as a leaf. Most likely, in the future, they're going to experience it as a branch. Right now, we have built a civilization that is stabilizing the identity as just be one person in one way all the time. But at the same time, our body is changing. Every experience we have changes who we are, right? And so all, I would say, inner realm problems are just classification issues. It's just like how the person used their free will to divide and conquer the meaning of the realm, right? And this is really what sets the scholars in this realm apart. There are some scholars that it's the unknown that is pulling them. It has nothing to do with what they know, There's a saying, they say, give a man a fish and he won't be hungry for a day. Teach a man how to fish and he won't be hungry for a lifetime. I feel the same sort of algorithm requires to happen with civilization. We are implementing on an individual level as human beings a kind of eat the fish of the day, but we are not updating fishing techniques, metaphorically speaking. And here's the big question: how does communication advance? One view is nature is doing it, so it's like technically it's advancing whether we like it or not. That means I'm trying to bring it into a conscious light in these talks, but civilization everything has been going forth. It's as if atoms get bored if they don't do anything. It's like why is everything vibrating? It's like because the universe is bored, obviously. Because of the vastness of even the universal position, there is no such thing as fixed knowledge. There's no such thing as teachers because there's nothing you can really teach in a world that is like a roller coaster ride. It's like, what can someone imagine a student and a teacher on a roller coaster ride? It's like, what can the teacher teach? Like, just the teacher can just look at this student and be like, yo, keep your eyes open. That's it. Nature is really moving everything before we even consider nothing. That means I think about it, I'm like, where did space come from? And I'm like, okay, we had to be materialistic creatures to then be able to fathom space. But then I wonder, where did matter come from, right? And so it's the codependence of space and matter, of awareness and thought, of mind and body. The mind is an atmosphere. It's as if like the best thing you can do in the fog is to just experience the rarity of the occasion, you know. There's some people who get caught in a mist and they're like, my God, why? You know, and there's some people who they're like, no way, this is new. The new is calling me. That means I will tell you the destiny of everybody is novelty. We're all destined to do things we haven't done before. I remember I wrote a poem once. In it, the moon was looking at the sun and being like, you know, is my light, do you know? Or am I just your light, you know? And the poem somehow goes to a position where even the sun says, my light is not even my light. You see, that's the true sign of, I would say, multidimensional royalty, where the nature and decency, it's as if your heart lives first, then your mind, you know, or the person has to just, you know, hit the speed bumps of guilt. This picture is a suggestion, I would say, of bad communication. If in the future they gotta wear suits like this and that's gonna become their everyday lives, it's like, you know, so some backup systems failed. And imagine if 8 billion people just built backup systems. It's like nowhere is looking at everywhere. It's like we're one thing, we realize everything, we are everything, then we realize everything is in nothing, and then either nothing requires everything or nothing requires the unknown. It could be that emptiness is a side to a coin. That means the other side of emptiness is not fullness. It could be something unfathomably unknown. Okay, so I gotta bring this back to the future's memory. There was this idea I had at the, you know, just the main point of this talk, that whatever we're doing is a sort of communication, multidimensional communication, as an object and a subject, and even as a witness beyond. for certain human beings. And this technically means we need to start with 3 civilizations at once. We have to build a civilization for fools, and then an intelligent civilization which honors efficiency, then a free civilization. Imagine a world. I'm going to create a sci-fi world right now. Just go along with it or resist it. Imagine there was a world where human beings in a parallel universe of Earth, everybody had this sort of sign, this sort of kind of like metal-like looking thing on their chest, right? And so this metal, it had 3 letters on it. B for the body, that means the person who has the B metal is a person who just feels matter is the ultimate, you know. Then we have the M metal. In some sense, these are people who feel the mind is like a river. You know, the mind is not like a drop. It's not just particles. It's like waving. It's waving around. So it was as if the people who feel they have the mind, they're semi-known, semi-unknown. And then people who have the mark of S, these are people who are literally being oceanic. That means I will say it, like people can write in the comment section, 100% stretching from Taoists, from people in Zen. People, there are many human beings not living as anything right now. So they would get the S metal, because for them, the inseparability of the individual activity and the cosmic activity has changed their nature of behavior. Just the instant witness of that. So now imagine these classifications of all human beings on Earth in regards to their allegiance to the material, the body, you know, in regards to their allegiance to the mind, and in regards to their allegiance to the soul, which you can say just keep it as the unknown. So these 3 types of human beings can then render, they will literally need 3 types of civilizations. And if extraterrestrials landed on the planet, those people with the S metal would be the first people to go and communicate. If suddenly the whole civilization wanted to build something in regards to, or draw the architecture or blueprint, or change a sort of cultural or mind-based things, these are people with the M metal. They go and serve that part. It's their part to play in the realm. And when it comes to service to the outer realms, those are the people with the B metal, for example. one school of thought, I have this model I call Ring of the Absent Heaven, where I see this world of ours as a plane of existence where you pilot in it in accordance to first space, the zero dimension, then a singular phenomenon, just the ability to notice things as you can say as one thing, right? Whether it's a thing or the whole universe is one thing. So there is the zero dimension, the one dimension, and the two dimension is the where duality is, where chaos and order are at an on an Aeonian battlefield. So this is where language is emerging. So language is in the two dimension, in the dualistic dimension. Beyond the two dimension, the reason I don't say third or fourth or fifth or sixth is because after you have duality, you can access infinity. That means imagine like a cubic spiral. Imagine an endlessly expanding cube, but it is spiraling, kind of as if a cubic Fibonacci display, spiraling display. We can communicate as individuals. We locate ourselves in the one dimension. We can communicate as nothing. Literally, a person can be on this planet, and I will tell you there's enough freedom to be nothing, to not even be an idea, you know. The same way a person can choose not to get off from a chair is the same way a person can choose not to get off from just no effort. You know, effort is like, that's pretty much why we have minds, to be able to direct the energy of our existence and with precision. That means I would say the purpose of consciousness is to pilot. Geometry is its own dimension, guys, and many ideological groups have tried to take ownership of it to a point where I have even suggested geometry should be its own branch. It should separate from mathematics, like a country fighting for its freedom, for its independence, you know. You know, we have Silicon Valley as a city, you can say in a poetic mode of looking at it as a city of engineers. You know, I would say there needs to be a giant liberation of geometry from all language. So what it means, a pure designer city. A city of designers. That's going to be the backup system. That means imagine all the branches of knowledge that have stretched so far. They all attempt to become universal backup systems. That means imagine the professors of all universities being like, all right, kids, the only reason you're here is to design a backup system so our species doesn't close its eyes too early. You know, then all the students will, like, they won't just be taking notes. They would just be like, at the same time, you know, wondering about future speeches to write, you know? It's like we're 8 billion kings and queens. Yet we are living in a civilization that hasn't even surpassed, for example, the agricultural phase. You see, it was always a declaration, you know, it was as if people had to choose. And so the advancement of communication has to be a choice ultimately. You know, we say people write history, but I will say history writes us. I feel for the advanced communicator, the world is a communication. Living is a communication. To be alive is just like in any sort of communication, an effort from within is going towards the without, going towards the outer. Something from a force from inside is moving outside. And think of just the eyes of the human being. We're so caught up in being like, we gotta see it to believe it. But our eyes are, look at what percentage of our whole biological body they are. It's as if I would say right now, if we were, if there was a kingdom of sensory perception, the king is the eyes. Our visual sensory perception is like battling it. It's like Game of Thrones with like the auditory perception, you know? Because the mind echoes the outer realms as well. That means if I'm like giving a talk and somebody comes and like shouts and like, you know, hey man, what's up? Like while I'm giving a talk, it's like the outer realms will echo. They will, like, the instant that while I'm giving the talk through one archetypal modality, you know, one identity position, imagine that person suddenly interrupting me, my psychology would fragment, because it's the whole purpose of multitasking, you know. That means in some sense it's part of the human being to understand one dimension by looking at the multidimensional. There is no right and wrong in a world where so much is left as potential and hasn't happened yet. That means imagine Edison going imagine like Edison going to his friends and being like, yo guys, I'm gonna create a source of light. I'm gonna become as powerful as the sun god. And people were like, yo Edison, you tripping, man, go get some rest, you know. Or if you want to be a comedian, just be honest, you know. It's like, what's going on, you know. And Edison's like, yo, I will be a god of light. You know, I will hold light in my hand, you know. Imagine Edison's like tripping, you know. And then nobody takes Edison seriously. Then suddenly Edison invents the light bulb. And people are like, no way, what he said was impossible in one dimension, in one degree of perception, but in another degree of perception, completely possible. So invention is the inner realms. And invention is a great example of how well the inner realms can be used. And even when we treat an invention as a communication, I will tell you, you know how Nikola Tesla drew the design of the AC motor? This dude was in a park taking notes on his notebook and feeding pigeons. And as he's going for a walk, suddenly in his inner realms, it all clicks. The invention gets made in the inner realms first. He suddenly sees the patent of the AC motor, and he gets a stick. They didn't have, like, I don't know, like he gets a stick and he draws the patent of the AC motor on the dirt in a park. That means with a stick on the dirt, one of the most important inventions of our time was landed from the inner realms to the outer realms. You see, people are landing all sorts of things from the inner realms and outer realms. It's just that there's no discretion, because self is more important than the other. And it's very hard, because if you live for others, then there comes the burden of, like, having the patience of a universal, you know? But I'm saying, like, but it's as if, like, it's a kind of balance where we build a system where, until we can know what we do with our individualism, the individualism doesn't take away from the collective potential. And people might be like, Mr. Within, why are you talking so fast? And I'll be like, I don't know. And that's the beginning of mysticism, guys. You know, the first thing, it's like, and all those people I hear, you know, I can tell you that want to communicate with other beings in other dimensions, esoteric, child's play, you know, in my view, it's all being rude to the unknown, because it's all objectifying an unknown, the unknown. So imagine what I would say behavioral metaphysics and esotericism has led. It has led to the objectification of a higher dimension. This is why you cannot have desire if you want to see something more, because the desire means you're still in the 2D. So if a person has a 2D desire for the 3D, you'll never see it, because the desire is starting from 2D, right? So so unless the butterfly lands on its own from the 3D, the calling comes, or the intent of the thought of it comes, you know, then there is I don't know what we can do at that point. Communication is surviving as a known phenomenon. That's it. Knowledge survives through communication, whether through the written form, whether through spoken, whether through art, whether through behavior, which pretty much dance is behavior. For me, when if a psychologist saw a dancer, you know, they would not just see a dancer, they would see the childhood of the yeah. I feel advanced communication is the missing link. You know, the game of the inner realms and outer realms, language. It's as if language. Imagine, like, there's a problem going on, and we're like, who do we blame? Who started this problem, right? And imagine right beside us, there's a person standing called language. And everybody and the person named language is quietly standing beside us, not saying anything, right? And we're like, who did this? You know, who did this to the universe? Who made us suffer? Who caused this? Do you know? And people are like, gods, people, morality, you know, angels, demons, da 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 da. It's like, okay, it's like, how much paint have we thrown? You know, subjective paint have we thrown over this object, right? So I'm saying beyond these, freedom doesn't have a leash. It cannot. And when I say a leash, it could be, you can see it as a very planetary view where the laws of nature are our boundaries. That means the person was like, I got boundaries, you know, and then the planet was like, I got boundaries too, you know, respect that shit. It's all just language that's standing quietly beside us is the imposter. That means I would say nobody is right, nobody is wrong. Language is just animating. Language, just like how we look at the human being in a secular fashion and we're like it is a collection of particles developed to over time. The moment is made, I would say, with unknown particles. Like, think of it this way. When we knew there was an atom, then we knew we could break the atom. But imagine how many particles there could be that we don't know there are there. And then we're making an analysis of the realm, you know. There's a story of this alchemist back in the day. This you can say Sufi alchemist. I don't know if it can be ascribed to Hafez, this story, but the story comes from that. Around that time, pretty much this alchemist, and alchemists were known, even though certain scholars deny this, but they were known to, in some sense, change lead into gold, having an elixir that they could change lead into gold. And that was a metaphor for the transformation of something lesser into something higher, like a two-dimensional intelligence transforming completely into a three-dimensional intelligence, right? So pretty much alchemists had a potion that could change things to gold. That's what I'm trying to say. So this alchemist in his 30s, he goes to this shoemaker. And of course, when you're a person you can make gold, it's like, you know, that shit's next level, right? So what happens is that the alchemist is there and he sees the shoemaker is this old, very quiet but intense old man, right? And the old man's like, you know, takes the shoe and he has this hammer and his hand's a bit shaky, but he's like, he's still living, you know, and he's fixing the shoe. And for a moment he completes finishing the shoe and he goes to the other room, and this alchemist in his 30s, and it's like, let's say it's a 70-year-old man who's fixing his shoe, and he's like, oh man, this guy's old, his hand's shaking, you know, it's like, I should be doing this instead of him. And so he goes and pours the potion on like some anvil or some metal thing and turns it into gold. And he's just waiting for the old man, the old shoemaker, to come back and be like surprised and be like, oh my god, this is so much money, oh my god. You know, and this story is from back in the day, guys, think like 700 years ago. And some people may be like, were there shoes 700 years ago? Yes, there were. There were shoes. Fashion is an ancient art form, but at the same time it can be illusion as well, you know. The old man comes back, and the alchemist is just smiling, you know. this 30-year-old kid, he's like, I'm gonna make this old man really happy. The old man sees him and notices what the guy's done. And he goes up to him very intensely and he says, change it back. Who told you to turn this into gold? And this 30-year-old, wealthy, educated alchemist is like, old man, what are you saying? Your hand is shaking. You can sell this and live a life where you don't have to work a single day. Do you know? How could you say this? And the old man's like, who told you to change this? As if who told you to touch nature? The alchemist looks at the old man and he's shocked. And he says, I'm sorry, old man, but I can't. Our technology, just my skill, just can allow me to make this metal into gold. I can't turn it back. And the old man just stands there intensely. And he's like, kids. And he touches the object and it turns back from gold into the metal it was. And this kid suddenly realizes there is a deeper knowledge that relates to the direct result of the experience. And so that's the thing. That's pretty much what the Raja Yogi realizes. That the universal memory is activated more for the Bhakti Yoga. You see, it's not just what a person knows, it's how they're also walking in life, right, with everything. I feel the human species just has to make a bunch of few simple genius chess moves. When I say chess moves, that means decisions have to be made in a phase. That means imagine the world is a horse and 8 billion people on the planet, each one is riding this horse, this multidimensional horse, right? Now, it's not just about like what kind of horse or what kind of saddle they've put on the horse, ideology they've placed on the outer route. It's also how they ride, how they live alongside not just living beings, a universal sector that was alive. That's true advanced communication, not the mouth noises of an advanced ape. This communication is just like painting. This is one type of communication. For the unknown witness, it is a causal attention. Like energy and attention have no past. Because they don't have a past, the future is limitless. But if you're burdened by your past, you can't even open doors that are just even halfway open. Human beings should express their inner realms. This is the coolest rebellion, and it has nothing to do with violence or anything physical in the outer realms. It is the rebellion that man is going to use art to cure the corruption in civilization. That means, let's say there's a person that's corrupt, let's say there's a person that isn't corrupt. Both of them are moments of creative phenomenology. And so, the good and bad are technically artwork. And I'm saying this in regards to a general view of analysis. I'm not saying like a person's nature, like there could be a person whose their intent is harm. There could be a person who their intent is love, or peace. You know, there's some people who even before they love or hate, they find they want to be centered to then move as a phenomenon. You know? Anyways, communication will advance either way. Human beings can choose to participate. There is intelligent, conscious winds, rhythms. Think of us as fish in an ocean, currents everywhere. And so a person can receive it, and it's about maintaining the speed of your desire. So let's say even before a person thinks about if a desire is right or wrong, they try to see if they can even control the speed of the desire. Imagine it was okay to desire everything, but you were moving in slow motion. You know, your desire was much more faster ahead, you know, but you were moving in slow motion, you know. So it would be I would say that the method that human beings have used to teach, they must use to teach themselves. And to teach the self means what kind of student is the experiences through this natural space-time continuum leaving behind. You know, that means it's as if this may sound like a strange statement, but there's people who can steal eyes. What that means is there is a thin line where the artificial and the real can't be discriminated, and it is in that thin line where if bonds of trust are made between an artificial intelligence and a real intelligence, it would be war. Do you see? So it's like any action done through ignorance, which I would say is like one view. Let's say every person, before they made a decision, they sat down patiently and they thought of at least 7 angles to the moment. And then they made whatever decision they wanted. I mean, pretty much what can we do on this planet? We can just move as objects or communicate subjects as a subject. And even try to update the whole system from how the past told us it's going to be. You know? What does freedom mean? In a world where if we don't, and what does freedom mean in an illusion, in a simulation? It's like it doesn't mean anything. It just means a more pleasant simulation. But the ultimate freedom, it's like every human being has to snap out of an emotional attachment, maybe perhaps, an emotional attachment with the desire of the idea they want to be. It doesn't mean not have the desire, it means don't impose the emotions for the thought. That means I feel the inner realms can be used whether you are inclined to Advaita or not, in a way where it's just geometry hovering in the air. That means you can judge yourself in a memory. Let's say you remember something wrong you did years ago, you know, and like you said something rude to someone or whatnot, like, so it's like you can remember that, but on some level that memory is design, color, space, depth. Do you see what I mean? It's like it's like the same time we're being characters in the story, the character, the story, and all of this is having shape. It's like we're living in one dimension that is living in multiple dimensions. You know, it's as if everybody's right and wrong. Anyways, guys, I hope this episode was helpful. The more consciously we live as human beings, you know, the more we will actually feel we're not animals. You know, because that's the whole task. If we wanted to be savage, violent animals, we could just all go into the forest and, you know, become like, you know, Tarzan's evil twin. You know what I mean? Like, it would. But I'm saying, the mind is the opportunity. All our ancestors, we know that what we have in common is that they lived as bodies and we live as bodies, but they never have had the ability to live as the type of mind you can live. That means if you treat this world like an island, like an island in this galaxy you're stranded in, you will go towards the newest information, right? You will seek what is there in the moment. But if you feel like it's like Earth is heaven, then you don't need to do anything. And that may defeat the opportunity, you know? But the moment it also goes beyond the ideological, of course, who can tell the unknown how to move the known? You know, the known can be like, yeah, the unknown moves like this, then the unknown moves the other way. It's like, oh my god, the unknown moved the other way. They asked the pilot who was fond of Zen, how do you pilot towards the destination? The pilot would say, I wonder how I would feel when the plane is landing. And that will be the emotional inspiration. There was a very nice line from the movie Gladiator, my favorite movie of all time. Where Maximus says, what we do in real life echoes in eternity. And whether that eternity is for the continuity of the human species, or it's for an eternity that is unconditional to form, the roads that our communication will pave will suggest the potential soil that the seeds of an advanced civilization will begin sprouting from, you know what I mean? Like, it's pretty much like we moved sticks and stones and we made fire. Now, now we're moving language and we're trying to do something with it, you know? And so the search has not stopped, and the healthiest view is that we know the unknown before we know the known. The collective unconscious is honestly, I would say, Carl Jung's backup system for humanity. That means when we see that it's not just what we know that we as human beings have in common, what we don't know, we also have in common. So if the context started in unknown, everybody would have the unknown in common. That means imagine it was just like, Instead of, we went from the Homo sapien to the sapien explorer. We became the unknown wanderer of how the wonders of this body are allowing for even psychology to be here, because there is explanations, for example, through Darwinian evolution, of how an object changed as an object, but how an object became a subject to itself, and the potential ability to use language. It's as if like atoms are talking a lot, and that's the greatest mystery. Matter is talking in space, realizing itself as the space before the matter, partly. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Help build a better memory for the future in how you are present in the moment. And I'll be on Discord, and if people want to hear poetry, we can share it there. Thanks for listening. Blessings.